9 times out of 10, when someone tries to help you with your swim technique, they prescribe the Scull Drill. In my opinion, it is the ultimate swim drill. So what is it, and how do you do it? So the Scull Drill looks like this. How can such a simple and slow-looking drill supposedly make such a difference? Well, the Scull Drill is essentially the foundation to swimming. If you think about it, when we swim, we're trying to catch and move as much water as possible with each stroke to propel ourselves through the water. And the earlier and more effective we are with that, the better. And this is exactly what the Scull Drill does. It essentially isolates this key area of the stroke, trying to get us to get a purchase of the water early on and be effective with that as we move our hands and propel ourselves through the water.
Okay, so there are actually a number of different sculling drills out there, all basically working on trying to catch and move the water at different points of the stroke. But before we get to all of that, I want to actually work on the very basics of simply getting a purchase and feel for the water. So for this, you want to get yourself to the shallow end of the pool or somewhere you can stand up like I am. And we're actually going to draw a figure of 8 with our hands, but kind of like a toppled over figure of 8. Imagine this figure of 8 on the side like this. And we're going to draw that with both of our hands. And the idea and the aim of this is to feel like you've got a purchase and you're moving the water throughout the whole of that figure of 8. There's no dead points in that. And if you're struggling to get that, what you can do is pop some hand paddles on or even some finger paddles on just to increase the surface area of your hand, and hopefully by doing so you'll start to get that feel and purchase of the water. Once you've got that, then take them off, drop back down to just simply using your hand. And by doing this, you should actually see the water moving quite a lot, almost like you're making a bit of a whirlpool in the water, and that's a good sign to show that you are getting a good purchase of the water. Okay, slight progression now. We're going to use exactly the same movement and motion with our hands, but now we're going to propel ourselves head first down the pool. So we're going to put our hands down by our sides, we're going to keep our arms relatively straight, and we're going to create that figure of 8 motion. Now, you can put a pool buoy in for this because we will not be using our legs. The propulsion is solely coming from that figure of 8 hand motion by our sides. Now, if you do want to, you can play around a slight pitch in your hands, making sure your palms are facing towards your feet. As I said, make sure that you keep your arms relatively straight. You can have a soft bend in the elbow, but make sure we're not doing any sweeping movements or propellers. It's that figure of 8 motion. Make sure we've got that feel of the water throughout the whole motion, making that figure of 8. Right, here we go. Well, once you've nailed that, you're now ready to move on to some proper scull drills. The first one is my personal favourite. I refer to it as the front scull. Place your face in the water in the same position as when swimming. Start with your hands outstretched in front of you in line with your shoulders, around 10 centimetres below the surface of the water. With a slight softness in the elbows, scull your hands out to either side by about a foot. Then scull and scoop your hands back towards the centre, sculling and scooping again back out, creating a slightly larger figure of 8 on either side. Now, to help with the propulsion on this drill, you might find that you want to just put a slight pitch in the hands so the palms are facing a touch towards you whilst you're creating that motion. In terms of breathing, you've got a couple of options here. You can either keep your head up throughout the entire scull, which I often tend to do, or to kind of be more in line with the normal freestyle or front crawl stroke. You put your head in the water and occasionally lift it up and then breathe out again whilst you're sculling. Now, the Scull Drill is actually a fantastic drill for improving the speed in which you catch at that point of the stroke, and also reducing any dead spots. Now, the dead spots in the stroke, which a lot of people fall into the trap of having, means that you're losing speed, and therefore when you lose speed, you end up dropping a bit in the water, which is going to slow you down. And then to overcome that, you end up having to pull a lot harder to get that speed back up and overcome that inertia, and that essentially makes it a very stop-start style of swimming and very inefficient. Now, another aspect of the skull to focus on is the elbows. You may have heard people refer to high elbows. The idea being that you keep the elbow above the hands. You should aim to do this during the skull drill. You'll notice that by doing so, you can actually apply more force through the water as opposed to dropping your elbows. And if you're doing it correctly, you should feel this in the shoulders and the upper back. Right, now moving on to the next drill, and this is what I like to call the mid-skull drill. We're essentially just moving back through the stroke slightly here. Now, to start off with this, the best way of explaining it is making a crucifix position with your arms out to either side, directly in line with your shoulders, and then we're actually going to drop in from the elbows. Obviously, if we're lying on a front and horizontal position, our hands are now dropped down directly below the elbows. And this is our start position for the mid-skull. So moving in the same pattern as we did previously, we will scull each hand out around a foot to either side. Then scull and scoop the water to head back to the center. Scull and scoop to head back out, again creating a figure of 8 with either hand. I like to explain this as if you're creating windscreen wipers with your arms. So obviously with the mid-skull, we are focusing on the midpoint of the pull phase of the stroke. And at this point in the stroke, we have one hand in the water below us, and we're essentially balancing on that hand. Now that requires a lot of control and strength, and that is essentially what this mid-skull is working on. It's giving us that control, it's giving us that strength so that we can balance on that hand and pull more effectively through that part of the stroke. So another small progression of this, if you're feeling up to it, is to swim 3 strokes, rotate to your side and pause on that stroke with one hand directly below you and the other directly above. In this position, simply dangle the arm recovering above the water with your hand in the water, scull it up and down to help keep you stable and afloat. Obviously, you can kick through this drill to help move you forwards. Do approximately 6 sculls, then carry on into another 3 full strokes and repeat again.
So once you're well practiced with these skull drills, you can then practice emulating this increased feel for the water in your full stroke, working on and focusing on one of these key elements at a time. A clean entry, beginning the catch as soon as possible with a tilt of the hands. Bending at the elbow without the elbow dropping to create a big paddle and start the propulsive phase. Getting your forearm into a vertical position, ready to push powerfully against the water. And if you're working on rotation within your stroke, then using the pulling arm underwater to stabilize. So there we have it, a bit of a 101 on sculling, what it is and how to do it yourself. Let me know how you get on. As I said, start at the absolute beginning with the absolute basics. Make sure you've got that before then progressing on to the others. If you've got any questions or unsure really still how to do it, then drop them in the comments section down below. And also let us know how you get on with them. It's a bit of a tricky one to master, but once you've got it, it is very satisfying. Well, if you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and see you next time.